Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, March the 19th, 2021. It is currently 8:36 a.m. Central Time. And once again, I'm here at Victory Baptist Church. Yes, we're off to a great start this morning. Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, March the 19th, 2021. It is currently 8:36 a.m. Central Time. And once again, I'm here at Victory Baptist Church. I'm inside the sanctuary. I'm at the back of the sanctuary at this table with all of my podcasting equipment set up. And I'm here to have a number of probably uncomfortable conversations with you this morning. All right. So let me just go ahead and just establish a warning. Well, let me establish what I'm going to do. Then I'm going to give you a brief warning, and then we're just going to jump in. All right. What we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to be doing a lot of talking about the situation in Atlanta, Georgia, with the shooting that took place there, where an individual went to some spas, massage parlors, took a gun, killed a total of 8 people, 6 of them being Asian women. We're going to be talking about that entire situation, and we're going to be looking at it from different perspectives and the different narratives that have kind of been established and that many people are approaching this story from these different narratives. Now, as we get into this, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, especially things related to sexuality, possibly sex addiction, which, let me just state this right from the start. I am very aware, so do not email me. I'm very aware that in 2012, that the American Psychiatric Association removed sex addiction from the DSM-5. And if you don't know what the DSM-5 is, I think it's about 1,000 pages long. It's basically the guidebook used by psychiatrists to diagnose mental disorders, right? So again, the DSM-5, if you don't know what it is, I think it's 1,000 pages. I could be wrong. I don't have a DSM-5 in front of me. I used to have to use the DSM-5 for a number of things, but I don't have the DSM-5 near me. But it's a guidebook used by psychiatrists to diagnose mental disorders, right? Now, they removed in that book sex addiction being a diagnosis. They removed it. And so I understand that, but we're still going to talk about sex addiction, sexual addiction, and does it have anything to do with this shooting that took place in Atlanta, Georgia? Should we even be looking at it from that perspective? And this is going to get us into a discussion about sexual addiction, purity culture, Christianity. There's a lot of different directions we're going to go this morning. So here's what I want to do. Instead of just turning this into like an hour and a half, 2-hour long podcast episode, I'm going to break these down into shorter episodes or shorter than an hour and a half. And we're just going to kind of focus on one aspect of this ongoing developing story and focus on that. And then in the next episode, focus on another aspect. And then in another episode, focus on another aspect. So that's how we're going to approach this. And I will group all of these together, and you can they'll be grouped together at the theologycentral.net pod page, theologycentral.net. If you go to episodes, one of the categories will be Atlanta shooting. And I'm going to take all of the programs that I've done so far on the Atlanta shooting, and they will all be grouped together, and then you can easily find them, and then you can kind of see how we've been reporting on this story. We've started reporting on the story early on. I think I was very early, and I can't talk about how many other programs may have been as early as we were, but we were very early on saying, wait a minute, I think there's going to be a Christian connection to this story. I think there's going to be a Christian connection because the shooter, who has now confessed to doing the shooting, he was connected to a Baptist church there. He supposedly is, as some were reporting it, devoutly religious, professing Christian. And I'm like, that could come to play in how we report this. So we were very early on in bringing that out. And I still think that was very important to look at it from that perspective. So we're going to just talk about all of this today. Now, here's the warning. When we get into the sexual addiction, the sexual purity culture side of things, I'm just going to be very blunt. I'm going to be very direct. And at any time when that subject comes up, I'm going to be very blunt, very direct. And I'm probably going to say a lot of things that may be considered offensive, or you may say you said that in the wrong way. I'm very aware of that, but we need to have some very frank adult discussions about a lot of issues that pertain to the church, purity culture, and sex. And we're going to use this shooting and shootings, I should say, plural, to kind of get us ultimately there, because I think that's one of the narratives that's being talked about. And put it this way, we can break it down this way. When it comes to the shootings in Atlanta, Georgia, was it racism or was it sexual addiction? Or could we even say, was it racism or was it purity culture? And we'll have to talk about what that means. Put it this way, was the Atlanta shootings motivated by racism, or were they motivated by Christianity's ethic when it comes to sexuality? Was Christianity to blame somehow in this? And the way what we teach about sexual morality and what we teach about avoiding this and this is wrong and this is wrong. Did that lead to this? Now, everyone's making all kinds of accusations, but we're going to discuss all of these different aspects, and we're going to do so in a very direct, frank way. And I'm going to try. I cannot be worried about offending anybody, because we need to have some very important conversations here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. As always, if you're listening to me live, please hit the little chat button. Feel free to say question, perspective, whatever you want to say in regards to this. I will not read your name on the air. I will, especially if you have something to say in regards to this subject that's very personal, very private, then I definitely will not read your name on the air. But I will maybe use your comment and weave it into the discussion. All right. So feel free and any time to do that. If you're not listening to us live and you would like to be able to listen to us live in the future, just a quick email to newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Say, how can I listen to you live? I will tell you how to download the app. It's absolutely free. And then you can listen to us live whenever we're live on the air, which is a lot, okay? Which is a lot. So, but if you want that opportunity, then by all means do so. So are you ready to have some adult conversations here about some very important issues? I hope you are. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to start this episode by just looking at how the news media has been reporting on this in the last, say, 24 hours. We're going to go to yesterday morning, and then yesterday evening. I tried to pull some audio from today, but really, in some ways, the media had kind of moved on to other stories for the most part. Again, I've kind of been talk radio. Maybe yesterday, talk radio spent a lot of time on it. But was it the day after the shooting? Talk radio wasn't talking about it, and then this morning they weren't talking about it. So it's kind of interesting. There's certain segments that seem very interested in the story, and other segments of society that seem to have just moved on. The Christian world has been very fascinating to watch. It's back and forth. Oh, we're going to talk about that in great detail. But let's just go to the news media, all right? So which narrative are they going to go with? Racism or Christianity, purity culture, sexual addiction? Which direction are they going to go? And here's what's interesting about this. We almost have these two competing narratives. And it's weird. How do we end up with two competing narratives when we have the shooter's own words saying the reason he did this was really because of sexual temptation? But it seems that even though the shooter has said, hey, I did this because of sexual temptation, that there are many just disregarding his words, going, that's just an excuse. He did this because of racism. Now, we can ask a question. All right, the guy has been caught. He's currently being held. He's confessed to the shootings. Of what advantage does he hope to gain? He's already been caught. He's already confessed to doing it. So what advantage does he hope to gain by saying, hey, this was sexual addiction versus I did this because of racism and I feared people of Asian descent because of COVID-19. I don't understand. Is there an advantage to saying sexual temptation over saying racism? He killed 8 people. So I don't know. So did he kill 8 people and then he calculated that he's going to blame sexual temptation because he thinks that will be the way to gain some kind of advantage in court? It just seems weird that people are just disregarding his claims because, again, from everything I am aware of, and anyone can correct me, I think it was, again, 2012 when the American Psychiatric Association removed sex addiction from the DSM-5. And again, that is the guidebook used by psychiatrists to diagnose mental disorders. So that, in other words, that's not even an actual mental disorder anymore. So how is that going to help him? So it's just weird. We have a shooter captured, confesses to doing it, says this is the reason I did it, and then everybody's like, no. That's not the reason. That's not the reason. That's not the reason. This is the reason. So that's been the interesting part of following this story. Let's just listen to how the news media is reporting on it. Let's just do that. Let's go to yesterday morning. Yes, let's go to yesterday morning with the news program called Up First. It's a podcast you can subscribe to. It's a way I usually start my morning, just trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And so we'll utilize their reporting on this shooting. This is a yesterday morning, Up First, NPR News.
The man accused of killing 8 people in the Atlanta area on Tuesday is due to be arraigned today on murder charges.
Much attention is focused on the question that is hardest to know: why anyone would commit such a senseless crime. The gunman said he had a sex addiction after driving considerable distances to target specifically Asian businesses. Police said 6 of the 8 people killed were women of Asian descent.
Let's bring in Lisa Hagen of member station WABE in Atlanta. Lisa, what's the latest on the investigation?
We do know that the suspect, 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long, was captured with a 9mm handgun in his car. Investigators say he was driving to Florida after the shootings in the Atlanta area because he wanted to continue his violence. But what we're seeing is plenty of shock, anger, and frustration about what happened, not just in Asian American neighborhoods, but in many communities of color. People are angry about what happened. Last night at one of the shooting sites, the Gold Spa in Atlanta, people were showing up with flowers and signs. One of them was Kat Bagger. She was holding a sign that read Black and Asian Solidarity.
So I think we can really use our platform as Black people to push forward the Asian community and support them in the way that we need to. I came out tonight because this is the next day and this is as sore as it gets. And I really wanted to let the Asian community know that they're supported and that they're very loved and that this is unacceptable and that we're as furious as they are.
Bagger says she's frustrated that the incident isn't being called racist violence.
So on that, 6 of the 8 people killed were women of Asian descent. The suspect is white. Why is law enforcement so far not calling these shootings racially motivated?
Well, authorities say they've asked the suspect about that exact thing, and he denies that there's a racial motivation. But that's a tough sell here. As we've said, there's lots of anger about that. Both Atlanta Police and Cherokee County Sheriff's Department are investigating the shootings, but Cherokee law enforcement officials' decision to focus on the suspect's narrative has been widely criticized. Cherokee County Sheriff's Captain Jay Baker's comments among them. On top of it, a Facebook page that appeared to belong to Captain Baker promoted a T-shirt with racist language about China and the coronavirus last year. People in the Asian community feel like they were targeted in these shootings. But many Asian American activists say this isn't new. Stephanie Cho was speaking during a community Zoom meeting last night to other organizers and told them white supremacy is, quote, literally killing us.
Many communities of color have been dealing with this many years. Asian American communities have been under the radar on this issue, but really, honestly, this is a time for us to really come together, be in solidarity, and really have those tough conversations, community conversations around policy.
And others on that call are already looking ahead to Friday, which is when President Biden had already been planning to be in Atlanta to tout his new recovery package. They're hoping when he gets here, he's going to speak about the violence around the country that's been aimed at Asian Americans in the last year, especially during the coronavirus pandemic.
What's been the reaction in the Atlanta area to all this?
So far, it's been a little muted. We should point out, of course, the pandemic is still a problem and probably keeping people away, and there was bad weather. We're already hearing that there are going to be demonstrations this weekend, things like marches and vigils to honor these folks who were killed here in Atlanta and in Cherokee County. But it's just clear that frustration and anger are bubbling up. Organizers here are talking about what happened and how to figure out marshaling resources and keeping attention on the victims and less on the suspect.
Lisa Hagen of member station WABE in Atlanta. Lisa, thanks a lot.
There is the report from yesterday morning, NPR News up first. And again, you can kind of hear the narrative they're going with. The narrative is somehow this is racially motivated, that Asian Americans were specifically targeted, people of Asian descent were specifically targeted. That's the direction they went. I mean, if you listen to that report, it seems like that if you go with any other direction, that's somehow wrong, and we should not go with the suspect's narrative. His narrative is to be rejected. The person who actually did the shooting, his narrative is to be rejected. He confesses to doing it, tells us the reason, but that's wrong. The reason is race. Okay, let's consider this. Let's at least think about this. And I'm going to throw this in probably in every episode. Let's just make sure we continue. Obviously, this is a theology podcast. So I'm going to start from a theological perspective and a Christian perspective. And first and foremost, we acknowledge that every wrong that is done, whatever narrative we want to attach to it, sexual addiction, racism, whatever, ultimately, every evil act, every act that we do that is wrong is driven first and foremost by the depravity that is inside every human heart. It starts from sin that is within us. Now, that does not remove personal responsibility. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that as Christians, we believe that the human heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things, so that we are sinners, therefore we commit sin. We did not become sinners by sinning. No, we sin because of what we are by our nature, we are sinners. And that's where all of this wrong ultimately derives from. So let's not forget our theological perspective. We see wrong in the world. It's because of the sin inside of us. It's wrong. It should be condemned. No one should excuse action, but we acknowledge that's where it ultimately derives from. So do we go with the racial idea, or do we go with the sexual addiction idea? It really comes down, I guess, to it appears that the way this is working is that it's in the eyes of the beholder. If you want to see racism, then you're going to say it's racism. And if you want to talk about the sexual Christian church, Christian purity movement idea of it, you can go with that direction. And I don't know if we're going to get, it seems like people may not be as interested in getting to the truth of what motivated this as utilizing whatever happened to go after whichever cause they are committed to. It just seems really interesting the way this story is playing out. Here's the shooter. He confesses, and I don't see what benefit he gets from saying, no, it wasn't racially motivated. It wasn't racially motivated. It was sexual addiction. Even if you're going to go with an insanity plea, sexual addiction, again, in 2012, was removed from the DSM-5. I don't know how many, I'm going to keep repeating that. So therefore, it's not an actual diagnosis that a psychiatrist can make, according to the DSM-5. So I don't know how that's going to help prove insanity. So I just don't get why. Like, someone's got to put it this way. Someone's got to explain to me why we can disregard the confession of the person who did the shooting, and then we can establish a motive on our own. And we're establishing that motive because of the race of the individual shot. I understand that it is definitely, you can definitely raise questions about why was it six Asian women were shot and killed? Why did it seem to be going in that direction? Asian-owned businesses, you can definitely call that into question, and it should be discussed. I just don't know if we can clearly make that the reason. I don't know if we can make that the reason. And let me throw out an idea. All right? And this is just speculation. But let me throw this out there. Is it possible that this is a sexually motivated struggle, right? That he was struggling with some kind of sexual issues, and the reason he went after Asian-owned businesses is because of his source of sexual temptation, is because he has a strong attraction to Asian women who he then viewed as being the enemy and blamed them for his sexual temptation and went after Asian-owned businesses because he has a strong attraction to Asian women. Is that a part of this story that should be at least considered? Now, I know saying that's going to be offensive to some, but we have to be honest. There are people who have very specific sexual desires, and to deny that, we would have to approach this like children and not adults. We all know that. There are people who have very specific sexual desires. It can be it can be hair color. It can be race. It can be a number of issues. It could be body shape. A lot of things can come into people's specific sexual desires. And if this person was having major sexual issues, could that be the reality of it? Could that be? I mean, have they gained access to this person's mobile device, computers, tablets? Do we have a history of maybe what pornography he was looking at? Does it give you any hints there? Do we have any history on social media or anything in this person's past that would demonstrate a racist background? Remember, even white supremacy was mentioned in the report from NPR. Do we have anything showing a white supremacist attitude, mentality? That he hates people of Asian descent? Did he post things in regards to COVID and blaming it on a specific race? What do we have? That report gave us nothing of specifics, but went with a specific narrative. And I just don't know. I just don't understand why the one aspect is just being disregarded, and this is the way we're going. So, I keep seeing this being the shootings in Atlanta being connected with the rise in violence against Asians in the United States of America. Are the two even connected? Are the two related in any way, shape, or form? I just don't know if there's something specific. I want to find the truth in this situation. I want to find the truth. Let's say another very blunt thing. Whether it's sexually driven, with that motivated his reason to do it, or was it racially motivated to do it? The bottom line is sadly, tragically, human beings were killed. And I know we all want a reason so that we can point the blame at the reason, but let's make sure before we put the blame on racism or sexual addiction or the church. I've seen the Southern Baptist Convention being blamed for this. I've seen the church that the young man attended was being blamed for this. I've seen all kinds of blame. Racism, I've seen everything. But let's make it very clear. It starts with that individual. Not from a theological perspective, that individual is a sinner, and sin ultimately leads to all kinds of wrong, sometimes horribly tragic, like shooting, or it can be lying and stealing and dishonesty and all the other things that sin leads to. But it's the individual. So let's always instead of assigning, what's his motivation, that individual, for whatever reason, decided to take a gun and kill human beings. And we can try to figure out all day the reasons why. And the reason I'm looking at the reasons is because of these narratives that are being thrown out there. So it's like, this is the way it's going to be remembered. Hey, in 2021, remember that 21-year-old guy who took a gun and went to these spas, massage parlors, and killed 8 people, and 6 of them were Asian women? Remember that racist? Remember that white supremacist? You remember the racism of that time? If that's the established narrative, that's how it's going to be remembered, and everyone's just going to see this as an ongoing, another example of the ongoing race problems we're having here in the United States of America. If that's the truth, then we need to look at what leads to racism. We could have a deeper conversation about that. But if it's not the truth, and there's something else going on here, and we completely miss that part of the story, then we're doing everyone a disservice. So it just seems like it's just interesting how some people are approaching this story. Let's listen to how it was covered last night on ABC News. Let's listen to how it was covered last night on ABC News. Now, for some reason, their audio is at a very low level. ABC News, you think they would be able to, at least check their volume levels, but the volume level here, I've got this cranked to 100 and it is still very low. I don't have any other software to boost the volume beyond what I can. So you may have to turn this up and then be prepared to turn it down when I come back in with my loud, yelling type of voice that usually irritates everyone. All right, so here we go.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Thursday night. And we begin tonight with new reporting here after the deadly shootings in Atlanta. 3 different spas targeted, 8 people killed, 6 of them women of Asian descent. Tonight, we have now learned the suspect bought the gun on the day of the attack. He's charged with 8 counts of murder, and with fear growing among the Asian American community, outrage growing across this country tonight, asking what is being done to stop the hate. Tonight, we are learning more about the victims, including Emily Tan. She owned one of the businesses. Police are trying to reach the families of several other women who worked at the spas. The surveillance showing the suspect, Robert Aaron Long, his own parents tipping off police after seeing the surveillance. The shootings prompting an outpouring of sorrow and outrage in Atlanta and across the nation. We have been reporting here on the increase in attacks on Asian Americans. On Capitol Hill today, the House holding its first hearing on anti-Asian discrimination in 3 decades. At the White House tonight, the president ordering the flag to be lowered to half staff. At News Tonight, involving the sheriff's captain, who will no longer be the spokesperson on this case after what he said, and serious questions about a post on social media. We begin here with ABC's Steve Osunsami again tonight from Atlanta.
Asian families who live in the North Atlanta suburbs are frightened, angered, and heartbroken tonight over the murders of the 8 people here, 6 of them Asian women. And they're asking us to remember Emily Tan. She owned Young's Asian Massage, where this white man with a gun was seen on surveillance video walking into her business before police say he shot 4 people dead. Today was her 50th birthday. She's a mother with a daughter who recently graduated college.
I can't put any reasoning behind why somebody would want to do something so horrific to such nice people.
At the second and third murder scenes less than an hour away in Atlanta, police are still trying to reach the families of the 4 Asian women who this same young man is accused of killing here.
We're working with the Consular Office of the Republic of Korea also to make that verification. But as soon as we are 100% sure and notifications have been made, we will definitely release those names.
Investigators say that 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long bought the gun he's accused of using on the day of the killings. Police have charged him with 8 counts of murder, and he's currently in the custody of police in the Atlanta suburbs.
We do not have a witness that actually is alive right now that can tell us who shot him.
The murders Tuesday night have shaken both Atlanta and America. Asian lawmakers in Georgia and on Capitol Hill are demanding more attention to the thousands of physical assaults on Asian Americans in the last year. They blame the racist notions that Asians are responsible for the pandemic.
There is a systemic problem here.
We are in pain, and for the last year, we've been screaming out for help.
The police in the suburbs have had to replace the officer who runs their briefings after Captain Jay Baker said this about the accused murderer.
He understood the gravity of it, and he was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope, and yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did.
Saying that the 21-year-old had a bad day felt ridiculously insensitive to friends.
All right, I have to keep interrupting every time I hear that report. Please note they don't give the fuller statement. Now, I would have to go find the fuller statement, but my understanding of the way that conversation went, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that he was explaining that this person, Robert Long, was basically, he had said that this was because of sexual temptation. He struggled with sexual temptation. He was struggling, and he ended up having a bad day, and he did this. I think he's saying he was having a bad day in his struggles with sexual temptation, and this is what he did. I don't think he was just saying, well, you had a bad day. It was just a bad day for him. In other words, it's a bad day for the shooter, not a bad day for the people who were killed. I know the media keeps going that direction, and I could be wrong in the way I'm trying to bring the broader context in, but I believe the broader context there is the sheriff was explaining that the shooter was saying, hey, this is not racially motivated. I struggled with sexual temptation, and I was having a very difficult time. And then the sheriff kind of fills in. I guess he was having a really difficult time. He was having a really difficult time, and as a result, this is what he did. Everyone keeps taking that comment. I don't think that's a fair representation of what the sheriff was trying to say. I'm not saying he said it correctly. I'm not saying he said it perfectly. That's always the problem with a live public communication. You got to be very careful because people will take your words and go all kinds of different directions. I've said things on a podcast, and then I'll get all of these emails going, wait a minute, that's not what I meant. Did you listen to what I said before? Did you listen to what I say after? That's why I have such a tendency. I know it bothers some people. Like I will repeat myself 5, 6, 7, 8 times because I'll get 900 emails going and I'm like, wait, you completely missed the point. I don't know if I'm being correct in the way I'm representing what the sheriff was trying to say. But again, let me state it again. When the sheriff said he had a bad day, I think he was referring to the fact that the shooter said, hey, this is not racially motivated. I have a problem with sexual temptation. These places are a source of said temptation. I was struggling. This is what I did. The sheriff takes that information, reports it to the media by saying, hey, he was struggling, so I guess he had a bad day, and this is what he did. Not like, hey, it's a bad day for the shooter. It's not a bad day for the victims and the victims' families. I don't think that's what I still stand by that I still think that's being misrepresented. I don't like when the media does that. I don't. Now, I could be wrong. You can probably go look up the full statement made by the sheriff on that day, that all the words leading up to it. Please note, whenever you see the media do that, it's always a warning sign. I mean, they took a very short clip of what the sheriff said. Boom. I mean, it was like, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and then boom. Here's what he meant. Whoa. Slow down there. If someone took any of my podcast episodes and took something, a 4 or 5 second clip of what I have said, I would be in so much trouble that I would be finished. Because there's just no one can survive by taking 4 or 5 seconds of a statement and then crucifying someone for that. I'm not saying the sheriff has handled this. I'm not making a judgment that he's handled it right or he's handled it in an incorrect way. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying that everyone deserves their fuller context to be heard. That's all I'm going to say. And someone just sent me a message. It seems to me that the mainstream media would rather say Americans are racist. That's definitely what I'm getting from this. Hey, the shootings take place. This just demonstrates white supremacy running amok. And white supremacy has gone after the African American community. Now it's going after the Asian American community. That seems to be the narrative that all of the media seems to be going with. And maybe there is racism involved here. But again, we have the shooter's own words. You say, well, why would you believe the shooter? Well, How else am I going to be able to understand? I mean, can I know what he was thinking? Now, again, if we can pull up social media history, and if, you walk into is there photographs of this person's apartment or bedroom showing racist literature, propaganda? Do we have social media posts with him blaming, Asians for COVID-19? I mean, do we have anything? We have his words, and then we have the narrative that the media is. I'm still baffled by this entire approach. I'm still baffled by this. All right, and I've got comments from someone who lived with the shooter, Robert Aaron Long, and they say it's not racially motivated. They say it. So you got the shooter, you got someone who lived with the shooter. They're both. So those are two people saying it's not racially motivated, but everything else seems to say it's racially motivated, and I've yet to see any proof offered up other than, yes, 6. And again, let's remember, whether the person is white, black, Asian, of Spanish descent, it doesn't matter. Human beings were killed. That's the first and foremost. Human beings were killed. That is horrible. That is tragic, and that must be condemned. We are just trying to look at the narratives that are being thrown out here, and I'm trying to understand it. So let's go back to ABC News. I just had to interrupt there because I still don't think the sheriff's words are being accurately discussed. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. And look, I will admit that maybe I am incorrect here. I just think that he just said something he just poorly communicated what he was trying to get across. I think what he was trying to get across is that this person struggled with sexual temptation. That's the reason he gave us. And I guess he was having a bad day in regards to that struggle. And this is what he did. I don't think he was saying, hey guys, we should feel bad for the shooter. He was having a bad day. I don't think that's what he was trying to communicate. And maybe I'm extra sensitive. Maybe I'm extra sensitive to always trying to give a speaker a benefit of the doubt, just maybe because how many hours a week do I do public speaking here behind this microphone? And I'll go back and when I head home, I'll grab the iPad and listen to one of the episodes as I'm driving back, and I'll be like, oh man, I didn't say that right. Man, I didn't say that right. Man, I didn't say that right. I'll listen to a sermon of mine, and I'll be like, oh, what were you thinking? You didn't say that correctly. So I just know that you can mess up easily. And that's no excuse, because it's the responsibility of the one communicating to communicate in a precise and clear way. But at the same time, you don't want to assign meaning to someone's words. I mean, has someone went and asked the sheriff, hey, what did you mean by that bad day comment? Did anyone ask for clarification? If so, why are we not airing the clarification in the report? Hey, remember what the sheriff said when he said the shooter was having a bad day? Why don't we add the clarification to that in our reporting? I bet you we can find that. I can almost guarantee the sheriff has made some clarification in regards to that. So, all right, let's continue with ABC.
And family of the people killed. In a statement, the sheriff apologized, saying that these words were not intended to disrespect any of the victims or the gravity of this tragedy.
Okay, good. They did give the statement. I knew that he had to. I knew that the sheriff had to say something. Now, he apologized. I wonder, did he give an explanation for what he was trying to say? I wonder if he gave an explanation for what. So at least they did do that. Good job on ABC News for at least doing that. That's good. I wish they would have went further and I wish they would have played the fuller context of the sheriff's words to give the listener, the viewer, a broader understanding of what the sheriff was trying to say, then give the sheriff's apology, and then give the sheriff's explanation if one was given. So, all right, let's continue.
Baker was trying unsuccessfully to share what the alleged gunman told investigators. But now an old Facebook post of his is causing even more concern. It reads, "Place your order while they last," above pictures of T-shirts that read COVID-19 imported virus from China. It's the same message that people bringing flowers to the memorials tonight find hurtful. and they're saying the names of Delania Yan and Dayu Feng, who died alongside Emily Tan.
A much-needed conversation across this country, and Steve, the president and vice president will be there tomorrow.
That's right. They're coming to the State House to meet with this state's delegation of Asian American lawmakers and community leaders. And I can tell you that the vice president and the president will get an earful of concern. David.
All right, Steve Osunsami leading us off again tonight. Thank you, Steve. We turn next here tonight to the coronavirus.
Okay, there we have it. ABC did not. I felt in some ways NPR kind of went stronger with kind of the racism narrative. ABC maybe wasn't as strong, but that's definitely where they were leaning. I'm going to look at something here really quick. Give me one second. Sheriff, hang on, give me here 1 second. Bad day. Okay. I'm gonna see Atlanta statement here. All right. Okay, here's the Washington Post. Captain who said spa shooting suspect had a bad day, no longer a spokesman on case, officials say. The backlash began with the sheriff's spokesman's statement to reporters that the mass shooting suspect was having a bad day. And again, all of these reports just put bad day in quotations, but they don't offer the fuller statement. And let me see here. This website is not very helpful. This is the Washington Post, and their website's not very helpful. So let's get out of there. Okay, here we go. I'm trying to look. Okay, here we go. Here's the New York Post. Now here we have the Georgia sheriff responds to cops' bad day comments and Atlanta spa shooting. All right. A Georgia sheriff was forced to issue an apology Thursday after a police captain said he accused Atlanta spa shooter after he said the accused Atlanta spa shooter had a bad day before he shot dead 8 people, insisting the comments were not intended to be disrespectful. Responding to the fervor over the controversial comments, which critics blasted as insensitive and racist, Cherokee County Sheriff Frank Reynolds said that Captain Jay Baker's remarks during the press conference were not intended to disrespect any of the victims, according to a press release posted on Twitter. Robert Aaron Long, and then it goes here, is accused of killing 8 people. Comments made by Cherokee's County Sheriff Office Captain Jay Baker have become the subject of much debate and anger, Reynolds said in the statement. And as much as his words were taken or construed as insensitive or inappropriate, they were not intended to disrespect any of the victims or the gravity of this tragedy or express empathy or sympathy for the suspect. Baker's comments were made in regard. Now, here we go. Baker's comments were made in regard to Long's alleged confession to police that he suffered from sex addiction and was trying to eliminate his sexual temptation. He has an issue that is considered a sex addiction, and he sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, Baker said during Wednesday's press conference. It's a temptation that he wanted to eliminate. So there you go. So I think I'm correct. The bad day comment is in the context of saying this guy was struggling with sexual temptation. He sees these places as a place where he could fulfill this temptation, and he wanted to eliminate them. So I guess he was having a bad day, and he did this. He was having a bad day in regards to sexual temptation. Not that the shooter was having a bad day, and therefore we should feel bad for him. That he was having a bad day in regards to the temptation, and this is how he chose to act. I don't even know why. It's just frustrating that we have to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes trying to clarify that because, you should see all the articles all over the internet about this. Bad day. See, he said bad day because racism, because he cares more about the white shooter than the Asian victims. See, the sheriff is a racist. This is all about racism. It's crazy that this is where the whole story has gone. And look, if that's where it needs to go, then rightfully so. And let's talk about racism and talk about racial issues in this country. But if that's an incorrect understanding of what happened, then maybe we're missing something that we really need to be talking about. Maybe. Look, here's a different perspective, all right? Listen to this, all right? Robert Aaron Long, the 21-year-old who is now facing multiple murder charges for killing 8 people at 3 massage parlors in the Atlanta area on Tuesday, struggled with sexual sins he committed in these establishments, a former roommate says. I lived with Robert Aaron Long for a few months. I can tell you right now that this is not racially motivated killing, but the product of an emotionally disturbed young man who was religious to the point of mania and who felt deep shame about why he frequented these places. Tyler Bayless revealed in a Facebook post Wednesday, I wonder how this would have gone if he had been in an environment where he wasn't repeatedly told how sinful he was for these things that drove him. What a tragic loss of life, and a kid that was all around one of the sweeter people you would ever meet. All right, so that's a whole completely different perspective. Now, again, the shooter said sexual temptation. A former roommate says sexual temptation. The media, racism, and the sheriff is a racist. And when he said it's a bad day, that's racism, and this is white supremacy. I mean, how radically different approaches to this story. Bayless, I guess the former roommate, further explained this way that we lived with Long in an Atlanta halfway house for recovering addicts named Maverick Recovery in late 2019 and early 2020. So they lived together in a house for people who were addicts. So that keeps being left out a lot of the reporting. Why is that left out? Again, if you're going to say it's racially motivated, show me something in Robert Long's past that would show racist hate for people of Asian descent. Just pull it up. I mean, anytime there's a shooter and it's racially motivated, I mean, they're on their social media accounts within 5 seconds. They're like, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. Here he is. He's posing with the Confederate flag, or here he is. He's posing with a Nazi flag, or here he's doing. Look at these comments. Look at these comments. Look, he was at a KKK meeting. You know, and I'm not saying you have to do those things to be a racist. I'm just saying that if you're going to claim racism, you need something, some indication. And the only thing that people can point to is, well, 6 Asian women were shot. I understand that. That should be considered. But shouldn't the other side of this story be considered as well? That's all I'm trying to say. They go on to say the former roommate, who last saw Long in February 2020, said he was being treated for drug addiction while Long was being treated for sex addiction. He revealed that Long admitted to frequenting massage parlors for explicitly sexual activity, but would become very emotionally distraught that he frequented these places. So there it is in 2020. There seems to be at least some confirmation to the claim that, hey, these massage parlors, he was going there for some kind of sexual satisfaction, and he was struggling with this and felt great shame with this back in February of 2020. That this has to be discussed. All right. I mean, that just seems like, why is the media just completely ignoring that? I don't understand why it's being ignored. Says in the halfway house, he would describe several of his sexual addiction relapses, as he called them. He would have a deep feeling of remorse and shame, say he needed to return to prayer and return to God. Bayless told the news agency that he was speaking to, who was once of Long, who was once a member of the student ministry at Crabapple's First Baptist Church. Long shot up 3 massage parlors in Atlanta area Tuesday, killing 6 Asian women and 2 white men. He was planning to shoot up more massage parlors in Florida, police said. 4 people. Now, here's the thing. Okay, well, Yeah, all right. There's so many different directions we can go. I'm trying to stay focused here, all right? So this is already taken longer than I wanted, but that's okay. 4 people died in long shooting spree during his first attack, and so they go through the different attacks and how many people were killed. And again, now they're going to quote the same person that everyone has now been removed from being the spokesman here. Captain Jay Baker of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department said at a press conference that Long did take responsibility for the shootings and dismissed reports that his actions were racially motivated. He does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue with what he considers a sex addiction and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places. It is a temptation that he wanted to eliminate. He was pretty much fed up, kind of at the end of his rope, and I guess it was really a bad day for him, and this is what he did. Please note how that the bad day comment is in the connection with sexual addiction, that this was a source of temptation. Whenever people talk about the bad day comment, please remind them of the fuller context of the statement. This person accepted responsibility, struggled with sexual temptation. These places were a place where he could go to fulfill it. I guess this was a bad day for him, a bad day in regards to sexual temptation. Now, he could have stated it differently, but he wasn't saying, oh, feel bad for the shooter. He had a really bad day. No, he had a bad day in sexual temptation, and I guess this is why this is the path he chose to carry out his solution in his mind. We can go on here. He had an issue with porn and was attempting to take out that temptation. Now, again, who's got access to his history of looking at porn? I mean, this is a very important, I know this may be an uncomfortable topic, but was he looking at pornography focused on Asian women? Does that possibly explain it? I'm not saying it excuses it. Please understand, explanation does not equal an excuse. I'm looking for reason. I'm looking for which narrative is true. I'm trying to talk about something that nobody else seems to want to talk about. That's what I'm trying to do here. It's all I'm trying to do. I'm going to get 9,000 accusations made against me. I'm just trying to go, here's what the news media is saying, and here's all the other evidence. All the evidence seems to be going in a completely different direction. I just want to find the truth, and then we can have a meaningful conversation about what the truth is, no matter how comfortable it is. If it's racism and we can prove it, let's have an uncomfortable discussion about racism. If it's sex, sexual addiction, Christianity, purity culture, and that's the truth, let's have an uncomfortable conversation about sexual addiction, Christianity, the church, purity culture, pornography. Let's have that uncomfortable conversation. I'm willing to go whichever direction the truth leads. That's all I'm trying to do. And people will probably take this completely out of context, but that's okay. They say, so let's see here. Brett Cottrell, Cottrell, who led the youth ministry at Crabapple Church from 2008 to 2017, told the Washington Post that Long's father was considered an important lay leader in the church. Now, that's a correction. Early on, this was reported that the shooter's father was a pastor. And now we find out he was just a lay leader. So please note why you have to continue to follow the story. Long would attend morning and evening activities on Sundays, along with meetings and Wednesday evening mission trips. He grew up as a typical teenager. It's not unusual for young men to be into video games, he said. Was he around guns and hunting? Yeah. Would I consider him to be obsessed? No. Was that a part of his life? Yeah. At that time, I wouldn't classify it as one of the main things he was involved in. Had he been deer hunting? Yes. I don't know what I would have I don't know that I would have considered it to be a massive chunk of his life. Like Bayless, several prominent critics of the evangelical community suggested that the influence of the Long Southern Baptist upbringing likely contributed to his response to his sexual struggles. All right, so this is another direction a lot of people are going. Hey, it's his Southern Baptist upbringing. It's the way Christianity deals with sexual sin. That's what led him to this mass shooting. Now, let's we just got to at least take this. We got to at least try to address this in a reasonable way. How many millions of people attend Southern Baptist churches or have attended Southern Baptist churches, have been taught how to deal with sexual sin by Southern Baptist churches, and how many of them have gone out to kill women as a result of this. I mean, what do we have any numbers? Do we have any numbers at all? I mean, I'm willing to look at the statistics. Here's how many shootings occurred by devoutly religious people who are Southern Baptists because of, and they did so because of their church's teaching on sexual sin. I was a Southern Baptist. I am obviously a Baptist now, independent Baptist. I've been in Baptist churches pretty much my whole Christian life. At some point, I was a Lutheran for a while, but primarily Baptist is where I have been. And I've known Baptist, all kinds of Baptists in my life, and I've never heard one say, you know what, if you're struggling with sexual sin, the solution is a gun and killing people. I have never even heard anything remotely close to that. Now, we could talk about the problems that Christian teaching on sexual sin could lead to. I'm all willing to have that discussion. I just think it's a big jump to go, hey, I think the reason he did this is because of his Southern Baptist upbringing, and yeah, so we'll continue here. So let's see here. Who's this individual? A lawyer, a former gymnast, and an outspoken abuse survivor, Rachel Den Hollander, suggested in a series of tweets that the ease with which the women at the massage parlors were killed is a reflection of how they are treated in Southern Baptist culture. The man who murdered women in a massage parlor yesterday says he was eliminating temptation because he had a sexual addiction. He was a baptized member of an SBC church. Brothers, pastors, seminary heads, how you teach sexuality matters. It can be life and death, she wrote. How you teach gender roles and how you talk about women, how you sexualize them as temptations or danger matters. It can be life and death. The way you indirectly blame women for abuse, lust, assault, temptation can be life and death. This is happening in your pulpits, in your seminaries, in your counseling programs. It is in your marriage books, your books on womanhood and manhood. It is in your counseling sessions. It is in your purity books and discussions. It is in your social media. Your words, your teachings, your actions, the message you send and apply, and the culture it creates matters. People pay the price. I am devastated, she said. Now, that's putting the blame at the church and the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, I've got no problem critiquing the way the church has handled sexual sins and sexual struggles. That is a conversation that Christianity needs to have. That's a question every Christian needs to struggle with. But that's what led to the shooting? I mean, how many men have sat in Christian churches going, man, okay, don't look at a woman with lust. Don't look at a woman with lust. Okay, do not look at pornography. Do not commit sexual sin. How many Christian teenagers are like, okay, now I'm a Christian. Okay, no sexual sin. No sexual sin. No sexual sin. No sexual sin. Okay, how millions of Christian men and young and women have. I'm just focusing on the male aspect of this because the shooter was male. Okay, so I'm focusing on that aspect. Women struggle with sexual sin because let's remember, for a man to be engaged in sexual sin usually requires, another person to be involved. If it's homosexuality, someone of the same sex, and if it's not homosexuality, someone of the opposite sex. So it always takes two individuals. So how many men have struggled with all of that, but never thought about taking a gun and going to kill? I mean, just think of how there's something wrong. Just think about how broken the logic is. These areas created sexual temptation. Well, if you shoot up all the massage parlors in Atlanta and close them all down, there's not other sources of sexual temptation in Atlanta, Georgia? None? So already something is just not right in the person's head that goes way beyond their view on sexuality. Because that's not going to stop it in any way, shape, or form. It's not. Right? And typically Christianity would argue that the sexual sin, it's because of the depravity inside of us. That's where it starts. So All right. So they go on to say, let's see what else they have here. They have Jamar Tisby, president of The Witness, also argued that church must accept some responsibility for Long's actions. So the church must accept responsibility. The church. It's the church's fault. So we have to accept, and I guess all churches or just his church? Well, here they say churches. Again, churches are well, here's okay, let me go back to, this is interesting the way that this is written. So Jamar Tisby, president of The Witness, also argued that the church must accept some responsibility for Long's actions, period. Then they drop down, and then in quotes, we have this. Again, churches are not responsible for every individual action of their members, but when you steep your flock in ideas that exclude and demonize, the community bears responsibility. Your ideas, words, and actions failed to challenge or worsely actively promoted racism and sexism. So now the church somehow promoted racism and sexism. When asked by the Christian Post to comment on the criticism Thursday, Russell Moore, president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, called the killing shocking and repulsive and said Christians should lead the way in standing against bigotry and injustice. These murders are shocking and repulsive. The killer should be brought to justice, and the roots of this violence should be made known as soon as it is revealed to investigators. While I do not yet know the reports from law enforcement as to the motives in this particular case, I'm hearing increasingly from Asian Americans, including Asian American Christians, who face escalating bigotry against them in this sick time. Such is immoral and unjust, he said in a statement. Every murderer should be held accountable for justice. Christians should lead the way in refusing to listen to and refusing to amplify the voices of those who incite hatred against minority populations. Jesus has taught us that hatred in the heart leads in the fullness of time to bloodshed. We should stand against that, he ended. So even he did not really go after the sexual part of it. He almost went from the racial part of it. So nobody wants to really have the discussion about, this is the way it works. It's racism, and then the people who want to talk about sex say it's the church's fault, and the church taught the wrong way, and then everyone else just kind of like, we don't want to deal with it. We're going to have some uncomfortable conversations in regards to the sexual aspect of this story, and that's what we'll do in the next episode. So which is it, racism or sexual addiction? We'll talk about that. I think we've kind of answered the question that everyone's going with racism. I'm not so sure. Shooter, a witness who lived with the shooter, the history of the shooter being in an addiction program dealing with sexual addiction, and literally said these massage parlors are where he was going to get sexually fulfilled, all indicates that what in his twisted mind, killing people was somehow an answer to his sexual addiction. That's got to be a part of the story. So far, no proof has been handed down by anyone that shows a racist past, racist comments, racial propaganda, nothing. Everything, it seems to appear that he had a porn problem. He went to these massage parlors for some kind of sexual satisfaction. He had been in a recovery program, even acknowledged that as far back as February of 2020. A former roommate, everything leads to that conclusion. So as of right now, I'm going to follow the sexual path. I'm going to follow the sexual narrative to this story. That's the path we're going to follow, and that's what we'll discuss in the next episode. We'll go that direction, and we'll have that uncomfortable discussion and see where it leads us. All right? That's what we'll do. If it turns out that racism is the real culprit and motive, and evidence is clearly brought out to demonstrate that, then by all means, we will do broadcasts to follow that. But for now, that's why I'm going to go in this direction. And hopefully that added some context to everything that you're hearing. I'm sorry we had to take so much time on the bad day comment, but the media continues to pull that out of its context and misrepresent that. And I want you to understand the fuller context there. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. That took an hour, we'll move on to another episode here in just a few minutes. I'll be back on the air shortly. If you have any questions or comments, email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. God bless.